6 months had passed since Mom died, and the house still felt empty. Every corner held memories: her coffee cup by the kitchen window, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her favorite blanket folded perfectly on the living room couch. Dad tried to keep everything the same, but anyone could see he was struggling. He'd sit in his chair after work staring at old photo albums, barely touching his dinner. That's why nobody was surprised when he started going to those grief support meetings at the community center. Dr. Peterson had recommended them, saying it would help Dad process everything he was going through. At first, he didn't want to go. "I'm fine," he'd say, which was obviously not true. But his sister finally convinced him to try it, just once. The first few weeks, Dad would come home from those meetings looking a little better, a little lighter somehow. He'd actually talk at dinner instead of just pushing food around his plate. He even smiled when he told me about some of the other people there: a woman who lost her husband to cancer, an elderly man whose wife died in her sleep, people who understood what he was feeling. Then everything changed. It was a Thursday evening when Dad came home with this strange look on his face. Not sad, not tired like usual, but almost excited. He was humming while he made tea, something he hadn't done since Mom got sick. "Good meeting tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual while doing homework at the kitchen table. "Actually, yes," he said, and there was something different in his voice. "I met someone really interesting. Her name is Lisa, and she's been going through the same thing we are. Lost her husband about a year ago. My pen stopped moving." Dad hadn't mentioned anyone specifically from the group before, and definitely not with that tone in his voice. There was something almost hopeful about the way he said her name. "That's nice, Dad. It's good you're connecting with people who understand." He nodded, but I could tell he wanted to say more. He kept glancing at me while stirring his tea like he was working up to something. "She's really easy to talk to," he finally said. "It makes me feel like maybe things can get better. You know?" I should have been happy for him. 6 months of watching Dad barely function, barely eat, barely live. Of course I wanted him to feel better. But something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. It felt too soon, too fast. Over the next few weeks, Lisa became a regular topic of conversation. Dad would come home from the support group meetings with stories about their talks, things she'd said that made him laugh, advice she'd given about handling grief. She sounded perfect, which is exactly what worried me. "She's been so helpful," Dad would say over dinner. "She understands exactly what it's like to lose someone." After 25 years of marriage. Her husband died suddenly too, heart attack at work. She knows how hard it is to figure out what comes next. The way Dad talked about her, it was like she had all the right answers. She'd apparently told him that Mom would want him to be happy, that holding on to grief forever wasn't healthy, that healing didn't mean forgetting. All true things, but hearing them third hand felt strange. Then Dad asked if he could invite her over for dinner. "I think you'd really like her," he said one morning over coffee. "She's warm, genuine, really down to earth. And she's curious about you, wants to meet the daughter I'm always talking about." Part of me wanted to say no. It felt wrong somehow, having another woman in Mom's space, sitting at Mom's table. But looking at Dad's face, seeing actual hope there for the first time, in months I couldn't crush that. "Sure," I said, "that sounds nice." Lisa arrived on a Saturday evening carrying flowers and a homemade apple pie. She was probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. The first thing she did was hug Dad, not a polite hug, but a real one, like she genuinely cared about him. Then she turned to me. "You must be Jessica," she said warmly. "Your dad talks about you constantly. He's so proud of you." She seemed sincere, but there was something about the way she looked around our living room, taking everything in, that felt a little too thorough, like she was cataloging details rather than just being curious. Dinner went well, though. Lisa asked me about college, my major, my plans after graduation. She told funny stories about her own college days, made Dad laugh more than I'd heard in months. She complimented Mom's recipe when Dad mentioned the pasta sauce was one she used to make. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, Lisa said, reaching over to squeeze Dad's hand. I can see where Jessica gets her strength from. It was the right thing to say, but something about it felt rehearsed. After dinner, Lisa insisted on helping with dishes despite our protests. While Dad went to find a photo album she'd asked to see, I found myself alone with her in the kitchen. Thank you for making my dad smile again, I said, genuinely meaning it despite my reservations. He's a special man, she replied, drying a plate carefully. You're both lucky to have each other. Family is everything, don't you think? I nodded, but noticed how her eyes had drifted to the family photos on the refrigerator, then to the mail on the counter, then to Dad's keys hanging by the door. Again, that feeling like she was memorizing details. It must be hard, she continued, managing everything while you're in school. Your dad mentioned you're studying business? That's wonderful. I bet you help him with all sorts of practical things. It was a strange comment, but before I could think too much about it, Dad returned with the photo album. The rest of the evening was spent looking at pictures and sharing stories. Lisa asked thoughtful questions, made appropriate comments, seemed genuinely interested in our family history, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was studying us. As weeks turned into months, Lisa became a regular part of Dad's life. She'd come over for dinner twice a week, join us for weekend activities, even started leaving small things at our house, a sweater, a book, gradually making herself at home. Dad was happier than he'd been since Mom died. He was eating better, sleeping better, even started taking care of himself again. His friends and coworkers all commented on the positive change. Everyone loved Lisa. She was charming, thoughtful, always knew exactly what to say in any situation. Maybe that's what bothered me most. She was too perfect. When Dad mentioned she'd been asking about his work, wanting to understand his business better so she could support him properly, I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. When she started talking about how important it was for people to update their wills and financial planning, after major life changes, especially for parents with children, it felt too convenient. But every time I tried to voice these concerns, they sounded petty and selfish. What was I supposed to say? That she was too supportive? Too interested in Dad's well-being? Too good at making him happy? By the time Dad mentioned they were getting serious, talking about a future together, Lisa had become such a fixture in our lives that it felt inevitable. She'd won over everyone, Dad's friends, his sister, even our neighbors. I was the only one who seemed to have doubts, which made me wonder if the problem was with me. Not her. Maybe I just wasn't ready to see Dad with someone else. Maybe I was being overprotective, seeing threats where none existed. After all, what were my actual concerns? That she asked questions? That she was interested in our lives? That she made Dad happy? When Dad finally told me they were engaged, I pushed down my worries and tried to focus on his joy. Whatever my instincts were telling me, I had to be wrong. Dad deserved happiness, and Lisa clearly made him happy. I just wished that nagging feeling in my gut would go away. The engagement party was everything Lisa wanted it to be. She'd planned every detail perfectly, the flowers, the menu, even the music playing softly in the background. All of Dad's friends were there, complimenting him on finding such a wonderful woman. His business partners shook her hand warmly, welcoming her to the family. Even my college friends who came home for the weekend seemed charmed by her, but something happened that night that I couldn't stop thinking about. I was in the kitchen, refilling the ice bucket when I overheard Lisa talking to Mrs. Henderson from next door. They were discussing the neighborhood, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned how she'd lived here for 30 years, watching all the families grow up. Oh, I know exactly what you mean, Lisa said. I grew up in Phoenix, and our neighborhood was just like this, very close-knit. I actually lived just a few blocks from the Desert Botanical Garden. Used to walk there every weekend as a kid. That stuck with me because just last week, I had mentioned to Lisa that I was thinking about visiting Phoenix for spring break. I'd asked her about good places to see, and she'd seemed oddly vague about it. When I specifically mentioned the Desert Botanical Garden, she'd just nodded and said, "Oh yes, that sounds familiar." Now she was claiming she'd walked there every weekend as a child. I tried to push it out of my mind. Maybe she'd just forgotten, or maybe she was being modest before. People don't always remember every detail of conversations, especially when they're getting to know someone new, but then other small things started bothering me. Lisa often talked about her background as a nurse, how she'd spent years caring for people, which explained why she was so good at taking care of Dad. It was one of the things that made Dad feel safe with her, the idea that she truly understood how to help someone heal. 2 weeks after the engagement party, Dad had a bad fall while fixing something on the roof. Nothing serious, but he'd scraped his arm pretty badly and was bleeding quite a bit. Lisa was there when it happened, and I expected her to jump into action with her medical training. Instead, she seemed almost panicked. She kept saying, "Oh no, and asking me what we should do. I was the one who cleaned the wound, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, and decided whether we needed to go to the emergency room. Lisa just stood there, looking pale and worried, when I mentioned it. Later, just casually saying how surprising it was that she'd seemed so unsure about basic first aid, she got defensive. Everyone reacts differently when it's someone they love, she said. Medical training goes out the window when you're emotionally involved, which made sense, I guess. But it felt like another piece that didn't quite fit. The biggest red flag came a few weeks later, and it happened completely by accident. I'd come home early from classes because my professor had gotten sick and canceled our afternoon lab. I walked into the house expecting it to be empty. Dad was at work and Lisa usually didn't come over until evening. But I heard voices coming from Dad's home office. I called out hello, but nobody answered. The voices continued, so I walked toward the office to see who was there. The door was partially closed, but I could see through the gap. Lisa was sitting at Dad's desk, going through his filing cabinet. She had papers spread out in front of her, and she was taking pictures of them with her phone. Real estate contracts, bank statements, business documents, things that definitely weren't any of her business. I stood there frozen, watching her methodically photograph page after page. She was being so careful, making sure to get clear shots of everything, then putting each document back exactly where she'd found it. When she finished with one file, she moved to another, and another. Like she'd done this before, I backed away quietly and went to my room, my heart pounding. 20 minutes later, I heard the front door close and Lisa's car pull out of the driveway that evening. When Dad came home and Lisa joined us for dinner, she acted completely normal. Cheerful, affectionate, asking about our days. She never mentioned being at the house earlier. Never said anything about looking at Dad's papers. I couldn't concentrate on anything else. During dinner, I kept staring at her, trying to figure out what she was planning to do with those photos. Dad was talking about his day at work, and Lisa was listening with that same interested expression she always had, asking thoughtful questions about his projects and clients. But now, I knew she already had detailed pictures of all those contracts and financial documents after dinner. I helped Dad clean up while Lisa went to the living room to make some phone calls. I thought about telling him what I'd seen, but how could I even start that conversation? "Hey, Dad, your fiancée was secretly photographing all your private business documents while you were at work today." It sounded crazy even in my head. Instead, I decided to test her again, this time more directly. "Lisa," I said when she came back to the kitchen, "I've been thinking about that nursing program you went through. My friend Ashley is considering nursing school, and I thought maybe you could give her some advice." "Which program did you attend?" She smiled brightly. "Oh, it was a wonderful program. Very thorough. They really prepared us for everything." "That's great. What was the name of the school?" For just a second, her smile flickered. "Well, it was a state program in Phoenix, very well regarded." "Which hospital did you do your clinical rotations at?" Another pause. "There were several. We rotated through different departments. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, but her answers were getting vaguer by the second. "I bet Ashley would love to hear about your experiences. Maybe you could talk to her sometime?" "Of course," Lisa said quickly. "I'd be happy to help," but something in her eyes had changed. She was still smiling, still being pleasant, but there was a coolness there that hadn't been before. Later that week, I decided to do a little research of my own. I started with social media, figuring I'd find Lisa's profiles and maybe learn more about her background. What I found was strange. Her Facebook account had been created just over a year ago. For someone in her 40s, that seemed odd. Most people our age had been on social media for years. Her profile had plenty of recent photos and posts, but nothing that went back more than 12 months. Her Instagram was the same, recent account, recent photos. No old pictures, no throwback posts, no longtime friends commenting on shared memories. I tried searching for her nursing license, but every state had different databases and most required personal information I didn't have. I looked up her previous address that she'd mentioned once, but couldn't find any records of her living there. The more I searched, the more questions I had. Meanwhile, Lisa was becoming more integrated into our lives every day. She'd started receiving mail at our house, just a few pieces here and there, but enough to establish residency. She had her own key now, her own parking spot in our driveway, her own shelf in our bathroom, and she kept asking questions about Dad's business, his investments, his retirement plans, always framed as caring concern, as wanting to support him and plan their future together. But after seeing her photographing those documents, every question felt loaded with hidden meaning. The worst part was watching Dad with her. He was so happy, so grateful to have found love again. He'd started talking about selling the house and buying something new together, making a fresh start. He'd mentioned updating his will and life insurance policies, making sure Lisa would be taken care of if anything happened to him. "It's the responsible thing to do," he'd said. "When you love someone, you want to make sure they're protected." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and said it sounded like a good idea, because what was I supposed to say? That I'd caught his fiancée going through his private papers? That her stories about her past didn't add up? That something felt fundamentally wrong about this whole relationship? I had no proof of anything actually criminal. Just a growing collection of inconsistencies and a sick feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away, but I knew I had to do something. Dad was planning to marry this woman in 3 months, and I was becoming more convinced every day that Lisa wasn't who she claimed to be. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every night I'd lie in bed thinking about Lisa going through Dad's papers, about all her vague answers, about how perfectly she seemed to fit into our lives. Too perfectly. By morning, I'd made a decision that felt both crazy and necessary. I was going to hire someone to look into Lisa's background properly. Someone who knew how to find information I couldn't access on my own. The problem was, I had no idea how to find a private investigator. It's not like there's a Yellow Pages section for people who investigate your dad's suspicious fiancée. I started by Googling private investigators in our area, which gave me an overwhelming list of websites with serious-looking people in suits promising to uncover the truth. After reading through dozens of websites and reviews, I found someone who seemed legitimate and reasonably priced. His name was Tom, and his office was downtown in a building that looked professional enough to make me feel like this was a real thing people did, not just something from movies. Tom was probably in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that made me feel less crazy for being there. His office was exactly what you'd expect: filing cabinets, a computer, some framed certificates on the wall. "So," he said after I'd explained the basic situation, "you want me to run a background check on your father's fiancée because you have concerns about her past." When he said it like that, it sounded so simple and so reasonable. "What kind of concerns?" he asked, pulling out a legal pad. I told him about the inconsistent stories, the social media accounts that only went back a year, the way she'd photographed Dad's documents. Tom listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, taking notes. "How much do you know about her previous life?" he asked. "Where she lived, worked, any previous marriages?" "She says she was married before in Phoenix. Her husband died of a heart attack about a year ago. She was a nurse, but she's been vague about which hospital or school. Her last name is Rodriguez." Tom nodded. "That's enough to start with. I'll run a comprehensive background check, public records, marriage certificates, death certificates, employment history, credit reports if possible. If she's who she says she is, we'll find confirmation. If she's not..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. How long will this take? I asked. Give me a week for the initial search. I'll call you as soon as I find anything significant. I paid him with money from my college savings account, money I'd been putting away for textbooks and emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. The next week was torture. I had to act normal around Dad and Lisa, pretending everything was fine while waiting for Tom to call. Lisa came over for dinner twice, and both times I found myself studying. Her face, looking for signs of deception, wondering who she really was. She seemed to sense something was different. At dinner on Wednesday, she kept asking if I was feeling okay, if school was stressing me out. Her concern seemed genuine, which made everything more confusing. You know, she said while we were cleaning up, I hope you feel comfortable talking to me about anything. I know I can never replace your mother, but I want you to know I'm here for you. The kindness in her voice made me feel guilty for investigating her. What if I was wrong? What if she really was just a woman who'd found love with my father, and I was destroying something beautiful because I couldn't handle seeing Dad with someone else? But then I remembered her going through those files, and my resolve strengthened. Tom called me on Friday afternoon while I was walking between classes. We need to meet, he said. His voice was serious in a way that made my stomach drop. Can you come to my office today? I skipped my last class and drove downtown, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me hoped he'd found nothing. That he'd tell me Lisa was exactly who she claimed to be and I could stop worrying. But the tone of his voice suggested otherwise. Tom's expression was grim when I walked into his office. He had a folder on his desk, thick with papers. Sit down, he said gently. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. He opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents. The woman calling herself Lisa Rodriguez doesn't exist, he said. At least, not the way she's described her life to you. My heart started pounding. What do you mean? There's no record of a Lisa Rodriguez matching her description ever being married in Phoenix. No death certificate for a husband who died of a heart attack. No nursing license in Arizona under that name. He pulled out another document. But here's what I did find. This woman's real name appears to be Lisa Valdez, and she has a very different history than what she's told your family. Tom spread out several papers in front of me. Police reports, court documents, newspaper clippings. 3 years ago in Colorado, Lisa Valdez was investigated in connection with the death of a wealthy widower named Robert Chun. He died 6 months after they got married, and there were questions about the circumstances. The case was eventually closed due to insufficient evidence, but not before investigators discovered that Lisa had taken out a large life insurance policy on Robert without his knowledge. I felt sick. He died, heart attack officially. But Robert's children contested the will because they found evidence that Lisa had been slowly poisoning him with his own heart medication, giving him double doses to weaken his heart. They couldn't prove it in court, but the insurance company refused to pay out. Tom pulled out another set of documents. Before that, in Texas, she was married to a man named William Foster. He didn't die, but he lost his entire savings after. Lisa convinced him to invest in various schemes that turned out to be fraudulent. By the time he realized what was happening, she disappeared with over $200,000. And before Texas? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Florida, James Patterson. Same pattern, wealthy older man, recent widower, whirlwind romance. James survived, but barely. His daughter found him confused and disoriented one day and took him to the hospital. Turns out someone had been giving him sedatives regularly, small doses that built up in his system. Lisa vanished before anyone could question her. Tom showed me photographs from various driver's licenses and marriage certificates. Same woman, different names. Lisa Rodriguez, Lisa Valdez, Lisa Foster, Lisa Patterson. Always the same face, always the same pattern. She targets men who are vulnerable, Tom explained. Recent widowers, usually wealthy, usually with children, who live far away or aren't very involved. She studies them for months before making contact, learns their routines, their weaknesses, their financial situations. How does she find them? I asked. Grief support groups are her favorite hunting ground. Obituaries in newspapers. Hospital visitor logs. She's very good at identifying targets and positioning herself to seem like a coincidence. I thought about how Lisa had met Dad at the grief support group, how she'd seemed to understand exactly what he was going through, how quickly their relationship had progressed. "There's more," Tom said, pulling out the final set of documents. "I found evidence that she's been planning this for months. She rented an apartment in town 8 months ago, 4 months before she supposedly met your father. And she's been doing research on him for even longer than that. He showed me printouts of Dad's business website, articles about his company, even some social media posts that mentioned his family and Mom's illness. She knew about your mother's death before she ever walked into that support group," Tom said. "She knew your father would be there, knew he'd be vulnerable, knew exactly how much money he had." The room was spinning. Everything I'd suspected was true, but it was so much worse than I'd imagined. "What do I do now?" I asked. Tom leaned back in his chair. "That's up to you. I can give you all this evidence, but confronting her could be dangerous. Based on her history, she doesn't just disappear when she's caught. She escalates." "What do you mean, escalates?" "Robert Chun died right after his children started asking questions about Lisa, William. Foster had a mysterious car accident the week before he was planning to go to the police. Both men survived long enough to marry her and change their wills, but not much longer. The implications hit me like a truck." "You think she's planning to hurt my dad?" "I think your father is in serious danger," Tom said quietly. "And I think you might be too if she realizes you're onto her." I sat in that office for another hour, going through every piece of evidence, trying to process what it all meant. Lisa wasn't just a gold digger or a con artist. She was something much worse, Dund. In 2 months, she was going to marry my father. Leaving Tom's office, I felt like I was carrying a bomb in my backpack. All that evidence, all those horrible truths about Lisa, and I had no idea how to tell Dad without destroying him. How do you tell someone that the person they love, the person who helped them heal from losing their life partner, is actually a predator who's been planning to hurt them all along? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with everything Tom had shown me. The fake identities, the dead husband in Colorado, the missing money in Texas. It felt like something from a crime show, not real life. Not my life. When I got home, Dad was in the kitchen making dinner, humming one of Mom's favorite songs. He looked happier than I'd seen him since before Mom got sick. The sight of him being so content, so trusting, made my chest tight with panic. "Hey, sweetheart," he said when I walked in. "Lisa's coming over tonight. She's bringing some wedding planning magazines. We're thinking about having the ceremony at the Botanical Gardens downtown. Your mom always loved that place." The mention of Mom in the same sentence as wedding planning felt like a slap. I managed to smile and nod, but inside I was screaming. "That sounds nice, Dad. You okay? You look a little pale?" "Just tired from classes, long day." Lisa arrived an hour later with her usual warm smile and a bag full of wedding magazines. She hugged Dad like she hadn't seen him in weeks instead of just yesterday, then turned to me with that practiced concern. "How was school today, honey?" The word honey coming from her mouth made my skin crawl now that I knew who she really was. But I played along, answered her questions, even looked at some of the magazine pages she showed me. All while thinking about Robert Chun, who trusted her just like Dad was trusting her now. After dinner, while Dad was taking a phone call from his business partner, Lisa and I were alone in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, talking about flowers and catering, when she said something that stopped my blood cold. "You know, Jessica, I've been thinking about what happens after your dad and I get married. This house has so many memories of your mother. It might be healthy for him to make a fresh start somewhere new." "Dad loves this house," I said carefully. "He and Mom built their whole life here." "I know, and I respect that. But sometimes holding on to the past prevents us from moving forward. I think he'd be happier somewhere that doesn't remind him of his loss every day." She said it so reasonably, so thoughtfully. But all I could think about was Tom telling me how, Lisa's previous victims had sold their homes and moved their assets around right before she disappeared with everything. Of course, we'd want to make sure you're taken care of too, she continued. College is expensive and your dad worries about being able to support you properly. If we sold this place and moved somewhere more affordable, there'd be more money available for your education. It sounded generous, caring even. But I knew better now. The next few days were torture. I went to classes, did homework, had dinner with Dad and Lisa, all while feeling like I was living in some alternate reality where everyone around me was in terrible danger and only I knew it. I called Tom twice, asking if he'd found anything more concrete that might convince Dad. He told me he was still digging, but warned me that time was running out. The wedding is in 6 weeks, I told him. Once they're married, once he changes his will like she's been suggesting. I know, Tom said. I'm working as fast as I can. 3 days later, Tom called with news that made everything even more urgent. I found something, he said. Can you meet me at my office right away? I told Dad I was going to study at the library, and drove downtown with my heart pounding. Tom was waiting with another folder, this one even thicker than the last. I've been digging deeper into Lisa's recent activities, he said, and what I found is very concerning. He pulled out a series of bank statements and financial documents. She's already started moving money, he said. Small amounts from your father's accounts, transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The transfers started 3 weeks ago. I stared at the statements in disbelief. How is she accessing his accounts? She probably has his login information. These transfers are being done online, and they're small enough that most people wouldn't notice them in their monthly statements. 500 here, 1,000 there, but they add up. Tom showed me the total. In 3 weeks, Lisa had stolen almost $15,000 from Dad's various accounts. There's more, Tom continued. He pulled out another document that made my stomach drop. She took out a life insurance policy on your father. $2 million with herself as the sole beneficiary. How is that even possible? Wouldn't Dad have to sign something? She forged his signature. I compared it to the signature on his business contracts that are public record. It's a very good forgery, but it's definitely fake. Tom spread out more papers. And here's the most damning evidence yet. I managed to get security footage from your father's office building. He turned his laptop toward me and played a video. The timestamp showed it was from last Tuesday night. Around 9 p.m., I watched in horror as Lisa used Dad's keycard to enter the building, then took the elevator to his floor. She was there for almost 2 hours, Tom said. Security cameras show her going through files in his office, photographing documents, even accessing his computer. The video was clear enough to see Lisa's face, clear enough to prove she'd been there when she was supposed to be at her book club. She'd lied to Dad about where she was that night. What was she looking for? I asked. Client information, most likely. Property values, investment details, anything that would help her understand exactly how much your father is worth and where his money is located. Tom pulled out the final piece of evidence, and this one scared me more than anything else. I also found records of some concerning purchases Lisa made in the past month. Large quantities of a heart medication called digoxin, the same medication that was found in Robert Chen's system when he died, but Dad doesn't have heart problems. Exactly. And in large doses, digoxin can cause heart attacks in healthy people. The symptoms look natural, especially in someone your father's age who's been under stress. I felt like I might throw up. She's planning to kill him. Based on her pattern and these recent activities, I believe your father is in immediate danger. The wedding is in 6 weeks, but I don't think she's planning to wait that long. Tom closed the laptop and leaned forward. Jessica, you need to go to the police with this evidence, tonight. Will they believe me? Is this enough proof? The forged insurance policy and the stolen money are definitely crimes. The rest creates a pattern that any detective would take seriously, especially combined with her history in other states. I sat there trying to process everything. The security footage, the stolen money, the fake insurance policy, the heart medication. It was overwhelming, but it was also undeniable proof that Lisa was planning to hurt Dad. There's one more thing, Tom said quietly. I've been monitoring Lisa's communications, and she's been in contact with someone about selling your father's business. She's been presenting herself as his wife and discussing the possibility of a quick sale, but they're not married yet. She's planning ahead. My guess is she wants everything in place so she can move quickly once your father is gone. The word gone hit me like a physical blow. We weren't just talking about Dad being robbed or deceived anymore. We were talking about him being murdered. What if she realizes I know? I asked, what if she comes after me too? Tom's expression was serious. That's a real possibility. You need to be very careful. Don't let on that you know anything. Act normal until we can get the police involved. I left Tom's office with copies of all the evidence in a manila envelope. Proof that the woman my father loved and trusted was actually planning to kill him? For his money. Proof that I had to somehow convince Dad to believe, even though it would break his heart. As I drove home, I realized I had less than 6 weeks to save my father's life. And Lisa had no idea that I was onto her. The weeks leading up to the wedding were the longest of my life. Every morning I woke up wondering if today would be the day Lisa decided Dad had outlived his usefulness. Every time he came home late from work, my heart would race until I heard his key in the door. I'd gone to the police with Tom's evidence, and Detective Martinez had been surprisingly understanding. But building a case takes time, and we were running out of it fast. The detective had put Lisa under surveillance, but she was being careful. Too careful. She knows something's up, Detective Martinez told me during one of our meetings. She's not making any suspicious moves while we're watching. It's like she's waiting for something. I knew what she was waiting for. The wedding, meanwhile, I had to pretend everything was normal. Dad was so excited about marrying Lisa, talking constantly about their honeymoon plans, about the future they were going to build together. Every conversation felt like a knife in my chest because I knew the truth about what Lisa was really planning. The worst part was watching how happy Dad was. He bought a new suit for the wedding, had been working out to look good in the photos, even started talking about wanting to dance with Lisa. The way he used to dance with Mom, the joy on his face when he talked about their future made what I had to do even harder. 3 days before the wedding, Tom called with disturbing news. Lisa just made a large withdrawal from one of your father's investment accounts, he said. $50,000 transferred to an offshore account. She's accelerating her timeline. My blood went cold. What does that mean? It means she's preparing to disappear. In my experience, when people like Lisa start moving large amounts of money, they're getting ready for the end game. The end game being ... your father's death, soon. That night at dinner, I watched Lisa more carefully than ever. She seemed different somehow. More relaxed, like someone who'd finished a difficult project. She was being extra affectionate with Dad, constantly touching his hand, telling him how much she loved him. I can't wait to be your wife, she kept saying. I feel like our real life is finally about to begin. The way she said real life sent chills down my spine. After dinner, while Dad was in his office paying some bills, Lisa helped me with the dishes. We worked in silence for a few minutes before she spoke. You know, Jessica, I want you to know how grateful I am that you've accepted me into your family. I know it couldn't have been easy, seeing your father with someone new. I kept washing dishes, not trusting myself to speak. I also want you to know that I'll take good care of him. Your father is a special man, and he deserves to be happy after everything he's been through. There was something in her tone that made me look at her. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold, like she was telling me something without actually saying it. I hope you'll always feel welcome in our home, she continued, even after things change, or kind of changes. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, you know, life changes. Your father's getting older, and I want to make sure his remaining years are peaceful. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about what's best for everyone. The way she said remaining years made my skin crawl. She was practically telling me she was planning to kill him, but doing it in a way that sounded like normal conversation. I think Dad has a lot of good years left, I said. Lisa's smile never wavered. I hope so, but we never know what life has in store, do we? That's why it's so important to make the most of every moment. That conversation convinced me that waiting for the police investigation was too dangerous. Lisa was planning something. For the wedding day or right after, and I couldn't let it happen. The morning of the wedding, I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to stop the ceremony myself. The wedding was being held at the Botanical Gardens downtown, just like Dad had wanted. It was a beautiful venue with flowers everywhere and a gazebo where the ceremony would take place. About 150 people were there, Dad's friends from work, our extended family, neighbors, people from the grief support group where Dad and Lisa had met. Everyone was dressed up and happy, celebrating what they thought was a beautiful love story. If only they knew the truth. I sat in the front row with Dad's sister. Aunt Rachel, wearing the dress Lisa had helped me pick out. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman planning to murder my father had helped me choose what to wear to stop her. Dad looked handsome in his new suit, standing at the altar with the biggest smile I'd seen since Mom died. He kept looking around at all the people who'd come to celebrate with him, clearly touched that so many people cared about his happiness. Then Lisa appeared at the back of the garden, and everyone turned to watch her walk down the aisle. She looked beautiful in her white dress, carrying a bouquet of the same flowers Mom had loved. Another manipulation, another way to make Dad feel like this was meant to be. As she walked toward the altar, Lisa caught my eye and smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile she usually gave me. This smile was different, knowing, like she was reminding me that she'd won. The ceremony began with the minister talking about love and commitment, about how beautiful it was to see two people finding happiness together after loss. Under normal circumstances, it would have been touching. Today, it felt like watching a lamb being led to slaughter. Do you, David, take Lisa to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer? Till death do you part? Dad's voice was strong and clear. I do. Do you, Lisa, take David to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? I do, Lisa said, and the way she emphasized till death made my stomach turn. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The garden was silent except for the sound of birds singing in the trees. This was it. This was my chance to save Dad's life, even if it meant destroying his happiness. My legs felt like jelly as I stood up. Every eye in the garden turned to me, including Dad's shocked face and Lisa's suddenly furious expression. I object, I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. The gasps from the crowd were immediate. Dad looked like I'd slapped him. Jessica, what are you doing? He asked, his voice full of hurt and confusion. I pulled out the manila envelope Tom had given me, the one with all the evidence of Lisa's crimes. My hands were trembling, but I knew I had to do this. Dad, I'm sorry, but Lisa isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Lisa Valdez, and she's wanted in 3 states for fraud and murder. The garden erupted in shocked murmurs. Lisa's face had gone completely white, but she was still trying to maintain her innocent act. Jessica, that's enough, she said firmly. You're obviously upset about your father remarrying, but this isn't the way to handle it. She's been stealing money from your accounts, Dad? She forged your signature on a life insurance policy? She's the same woman who killed Robert Chun in Colorado and robbed William Foster in Texas. I started pulling documents from the envelope, holding them up for everyone to see. The security footage photos, the bank statements showing the stolen money, the forged insurance documents. This woman has been planning to murder you, Dad. Just like she murdered her last husband. Dad looked like he was in shock, staring at the papers in my hands. But Lisa was no longer pretending to be the sweet, innocent woman everyone thought they knew. You little bitch, she snarled, dropping all pretense. You have no idea what you've just done. She tried to run, pushing past the startled wedding guest toward the parking lot. But Detective Martinez and 2 other officers were already moving through the crowd. They'd been stationed around the garden waiting for exactly this moment. Lisa Valdez, you're under arrest, Detective Martinez called out as they surrounded her. Lisa fought as they handcuffed her, screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding, how I was just a jealous daughter who couldn't accept her father's happiness. But the evidence spoke for itself. As the police led her away, she turned back to look at me one last time. The mask was completely gone now, and I could see the cold, calculating predator she really was. "This isn't over," she said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. The wedding guests were in chaos, people crying and hugging and trying to understand what had just happened. Dad stood at the altar looking lost, like his world had just collapsed around him. I went to him and wrapped my arms around him, both of us crying. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry I had to do it this way." It took him a moment to respond, but when he did, his voice was thick with emotion. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved my life, and I almost didn't listen to you." 6 months later, Dad and I were closer than we'd ever been. The trial had been difficult, with Lisa trying to claim she was innocent, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was sentenced to 25 years for fraud, attempted murder, and the death of Robert Chun in Colorado. Dad started real therapy to deal with his grief and the trauma of being manipulated. He learned how predators like Lisa target vulnerable people and how to recognize the warning signs. "I was so desperate to not be alone," he told me one day. "I ignored all the red flags because I wanted so badly to believe someone could love me again."